My name is Melissa, and I'm with Gilda's Club Grand Rapids. And it's so good to be here with you on this virtual platform. We're so grateful that you're watching us, and we have a great presentation for you today. So we also want to invite you to make comments. Let us know that you're watching. Just write in those comment section right underneath this live event, and just let us know maybe if there's questions that come up about grief and loss, or if there's things that you do that help you, or something that you just want to say. We'd love to hear from you. So today we have with us Ashley Huisman from Emmanuel Hospice, and we're so glad to have you with us, Ashley. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we love it when we can partner with our community resources here in Grand Rapids. It's really a rich community that has many opportunities for support and help for everyone. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, thanks. I'm so glad you're here. So today we're going to be bringing you a discussion on grief and COVID, and in addition to that, anticipatory grief. So we're going to just be talking briefly about both of those things. Probably some of what we're going to talk about is going to just touch on topics, and you might want to know more. Again, we really encourage you to either ask us questions or to look up our information. We do have that contact information right on this post and the websites, and so you can look up for more information or get a hold of us. So to start us out, Ashley, I'm just wondering, how does grief look different in this time of pandemic and this COVID time?
Absolutely. So grief and loss right now is prevalent throughout our society. We're seeing it in so many ways right now. I call them like different types of grief or different levels of grief. We see loss in all sorts of ways. The most common one, loss of routine, loss of normalcy, or loss of security. Now, as we stepped into COVID, we all kind of had this quick, abrupt change. Some of us became fearful of getting sick. We lost jobs, either temporarily or permanently. We definitely had a change in routine. Families were staying at home, kids were at home, schools came home. So just a huge change. And a lot of that could bring on types of grief. But we also had the loss of relationships, loss of that interaction with other people, and ultimately the greatest loss, the loss of a person or a loved one. So we had quite the range of losses that lead to grief during COVID.
I think so. In putting those two things together, I feel like we also had this grief around that if someone was sick, that we weren't able to be with them the way that we typically are. And so there's like this layering of these grief experiences in relation to our life and somebody's death.
Absolutely. We're so used to when someone is sick, when someone needs something, what do? We show up. We go visit them at the hospital, or we bring them something at home. And suddenly we were thrown into this new thing where it was like, oh, you need to stay away. And it took us a little while to get creative and to try and reach out in different ways. But again, it's a loss of what is normal. How do I react when I can't react as I normally would have? I like the comparison. So quite often I talk about love. So the idea of love in general, so many different types of love. You have the love of like a family member, the love of a friend, love of a pet, but then you have the love of chocolate or summer or whatever you might have. And grief is the same way. We use one term to describe so many different things. Again, grief and loss for a job versus a person both are great losses, but they're a little bit different, a little bit more unique.
Sure. Absolutely.
But with that, no matter what type of grief it is, we see a lot of the same types of symptoms, if you want to call them symptoms. Um, Irritability is kind of a big one. A lot of people don't realize that they're being a little bit irritable, or they're caught off guard with that they're not quite in their normal happy go lucky mood. And they don't realize that it's grief related. So sometimes we're grieving things, changes, and we find that we're easy to get mad about something that we're usually very patient with. We get angry overall, or we have more anxiety, or we're tearful. Maybe we're eating a lot more, or not eating enough anymore. And also doing the same thing with sleep. We're either not able to sleep, or we're sleeping way too much and we're tired all the time. Those are all symptoms that we can attribute to grief during this time.
Sure. And
Mhm.
I would think that we might not have put those two things together, COVID and those characteristics of grief or symptoms of grief, that that is a need of ours to allow ourselves to grieve, like the
Mhm.
action piece of that, um, of doing some self-care around that.
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
sometimes it can sneak up on us. We don't always feel like we have it. And suddenly we realize, oh, I'm tearful a lot. Or maybe it's not that you can even pinpoint one exact loss. You think, I have a lot of people that tell me that, oh, my loved one passed away. And if that was the only thing going on in my life, I could handle that. But the problem is, I have so many losses going on. Very rarely do I have someone that calls me and just wants to talk about one thing. It's
yeah,
usually, I lost someone, and I've lost my routine. I've lost my income. Oh, my pet also died or is sick. Maybe someone hasn't died yet, but they're just sick. That's a loss. So quite often in our lives, it's the accumulation of many things, not just one, that can feel so heavy.
yeah. Well, and it's making me think about how we were thinking, at least this was my thinking, and maybe I'm not alone, but that this COVID pandemic piece was for this period of time. And we were going to get to this date or this period of time, and it was going to be over, and we were going to go back to what our routine was. But in fact, we're finding out that it just is getting longer and longer. And this piece of there is no real date. And what there is specifically is this big change, is that
Mhm.
really we're not going to do life the way that we used to do it. It
We
has
can all
shifted.
deal with things for a short while and know, okay, there's an ending. It's
Yeah,
really hard when we don't see a finish line, when we don't know of an exact date of when it will be done. That can make grief even worse, because it's not like I have a goal to get to. It feels like it's an unending, futuristic, unknown, and that can compound grief and make it that much harder.
yeah. It almost is like it moves grief into a bit of that despair area.
Mhm.
If we don't have the right support systems under us and self-care. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Oh,
Another big area is anticipatory grief. And so this is the idea that we're anticipating losses that are to come. So kind of the classic example is, so if we have a family member that is sick, that is terminally ill, and we're slowly watching them get sicker and sicker, we're anticipating what losses to come.
mhm.
That can also be applied to different things in our life, where we're anticipating the different losses that are to come down the road. And many of those symptoms of grief are the exact same during that time as they are after. So for the loved one that has someone with dementia, we're grieving the loss of their memory day by day as they are unable to do certain things that they used to. We grieve that day by day. And so it doesn't always mean that we're grieving after the loss of something. We can actually grieve the loss of it before we lose it.
Yeah, there's that. Some people call that little deaths, right?
Yeah.
And then there's this, and that happened to me. My father died of dementia. And so for 8 years, we were grieving the letting go of, one part of him or something that he used to be able to do that he wasn't able to do anymore, or even our relationship with him. And so it was this constant shifting and constant grieving. And until he died, and then there was the grief of the death in addition to that. Yeah.
And we see that a lot in hospice as we're working with people that are terminally ill. The other thing is too, specifically with COVID, we anticipate that our lives may not go back to the way they were. So maybe we're anticipating the loss of what our normal life might not look like or something, so as we think about future, we anticipate things and we start to feel maybe anxious, fearful. Fear has a lot to do with grief. Fear of the unknown. Again, lots of anxiety, sadness, anger, all of those things that we might be feeling can be considered grief.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So how would we know if we're having anxiety or that kind of thing connected to this anticipatory grief, which, I mean, I'm just thinking of college students, period, is that there is this anticipatory fear and grief just for the college students and for the parents of sending their kids back to the institution, or, I mean, there's just so many where people are starting to go back to work. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So anxiety looks a lot like maybe running thoughts, overwhelming thoughts, heart rate goes up, you might be sweating a little bit. A lot of it has to do with worrying about things that maybe you can control, but also things that you can't control. So when thinking ahead to something that might make you anxious, looking at it and breaking it down about what can I change, what can I control, what things are out of my control that I really can't do anything about, and trying to let those go. So knowing that sometimes things are just simply out of my control and I will do the best within the realm of what I can do. But sometimes we have to realize that we can't control everything.
yeah. Oh, I love that piece of really kind of acceptance. We talk about quite a bit of controlling what's in our hula hoop, and yeah. And when we're in the future, we're in fear, as you said. And when we're in the moment, typically we can help settle ourselves when we're in the moment. Yeah.
For sure. And when I'm thinking about futuristic things, I've been talking to people a lot about funerals, things that maybe they haven't been able to do, or they're wondering if they're going to be able to do it in the future. And funerals are a big aspect of grief and loss as well. We haven't seen a lot of the traditional funerals happen for quite a few months, at least not to the extent that we would normally expect to see them. So not those large funerals that bring a lot of the sense of closure, tradition. There's a certain amount of comfort that comes from tradition and going through memorial services or celebration of life or funeral or whatever you want to call it. But sometimes we feel unfinished, or we don't feel like reality has set in yet because we don't have some of those. So that's something that I talk to people about a lot too, about just simply, grieving the loss of not having a funeral or not having one that they had hoped or imagined that would happen.
Sure. That is such a good point, Ashley. And so what do you think people can do to help themselves bring some closure for themselves, to their loved ones or their person's life, or their relationship with them and all of that?
Yeah, so there's some creative ways. We're always trying to be creative in what we can do now. And some funerals are happening more and more as more small groups of people can get together. But again, it might not feel like the grand event that we had always dreamed and imagined for our loved one. But doing something maybe virtually, or trying to do a outside gathering, or several small group gatherings, or sometime that you can share memories. Find what part of the funeral feels very meaningful to you, and see if you can do that in a different way. So again, sharing it virtually, or having, you can get creative. You can have cars drive by, just like we're doing for birthday parties, but a way that people can come and share memories and honor the loved one that they miss. But also do something in honor of that person. So maybe doing a donation to a charity that they really cared about, or volunteering at an organization that does something that they were really interested in. Something that helps you commemorate them, and really maybe tries to give you some of that closure. Although you might not even know what will give you closure until you try it.
It really makes me think of one of our founders, Deb Bailey, died earlier this summer. And it was when we were still under the stay-at-home order. And so we put up a big sign, a big picture of her, and there's a mailbox, and we dedicated a bench to her right at Gilda's Club, and people could drive by and they could write notes to her family or to Gilda's Club and put it in the mailbox. And so there was this beautiful communication back and forth, and showing of support through that in a physical way, but in still a safe way, and I know,
so creative, and I love that.
yeah. And we were very comforted by that, seeing people come through and hearing what they had to say about her, the impact she had on their lives. Yeah.
And I love that we're seeing people stretching parts of their creativity and imagination that we've never seen before. So the downside to COVID, there's a lot of them, but the positive side is that we're all learning to adapt in different ways and connect in different ways. And I think this is just one way that we can show support to each other too. Phone calls with someone that you really feel safe talking to, Zoom sessions, Facebook Live, Facebook chats, meeting outside at a safe distance. A lot of that can be very, very helpful. Just expressing your emotions, bringing up memories, all of those positive things that can help you work through your grief is good.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, I love that. So it just brings me to, if you are having some deep grief, and you are having these outside of even maybe someone in your life having died, but the grief of COVID and the grief of this change in our society, our culture, and there's so many things. COVID is just one of them, right? There's so many things that are changing right now. What are some things that people can do to really help themselves, that also will help if someone in your life has died, if you're on a grief journey from a death?
Yeah, so two things that I always want to start off with to remind people. So I kind of talked about the idea of love earlier and how we love things differently. Again, grief changes. So going back to love, the love that we have for someone can change over time. Love deepens, love is different, it changes. Grief will also change over time. The grief that we have when someone first passes away is different than the grief that we have in 5 or 10 years, or even just a few months later. So although we never fully get over grief, because we never forget, that person doesn't completely disappear from our lives and our memories, but our grief does develop over time. So it's not always going to feel exactly the same way. But remembering too that you're resilient and strong. And some people forget during grief just how strong they are, and the fact that they've actually lived through some really tough times before, and that they'll also live through this. So I often just love to remind the people that I support that you are resilient and you are strong and you can make it through grief. Um, but then some more practical ideas. So you got to find your thing. And it's hard to know at the very beginning, what is your thing? And by that, I mean, what works for one person may work for someone else, but it might not work for you. So trying some different things until you find something that comforts you that day or helps you process some emotions or some feelings that day. And what works one day, you may find a few weeks later isn't helpful as much. Some people like to go for walks, runs, exercise, get outside and move. I personally like to work on tasks that take my full focus. So I can't think about anything else except what I'm doing. Other people like to curl up with a movie or a book, take a bath, eat lots of chocolate or something comforting. So journaling is great. The sky's the limit on what might work for you, but trial and error. Try something. If it seems to be helping, awesome. If you're trying it and it's really not doing anything for you, scrap it and try something else. Don't get discouraged. Just know working through those emotions or feelings is good. Also, taking a break from your grief is okay. It's okay to set it aside for a few minutes, enjoy the sunshine, laugh with friends or kiddos, and just take a few minutes to smile and know your grief will be right back there when you're ready to pick it back up. It's okay to take breaks from it too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And to have as many of those things in your toolkit as possible. And I'm just going to add in there, connecting with someone, either a professional, if that works for you, or a group like we have at Gilda's Club, but connecting with other people who understand the grief process and who are on a grief journey can really be uplifting. And I often think of the eyes of the young ones, the children who come through Gilda's Club, and when they meet somebody else and they say, you've had someone in your life die, and their eyes just light up because they thought they were the only ones. They thought they were the only family. And just finding out that they're not alone creates this buoy for them, this sense of support, this sense of groundedness and connectedness that really helps them move through some of those really tough feelings when they're alone, that they remember, oh, somebody else, knew this.
That they're not alone. When I talk to people that are specifically during COVID, they want two things, and we have to find an in-between. They want one, they don't want anybody to tell them that I know what you're going through. I've been there, because nobody has. You're such a unique situation. Nobody's been exactly in your shoes. On the other hand, they don't want to be alone. So also knowing that they're not the only ones that have struggled during COVID. They are part of a group of people. So there's that middle ground. I don't know, nobody knows exactly what you're going through, but also a lot of people have gone through something pretty similar, and they're struggling with the same types of thoughts and questions as well. So finding that in between and recognizing that there is a group of people a lot like you going through grief.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And what about those people who just can't quite? I'm thinking about like coping skills on either end, like allowing yourself to take a nap or always being in bed, right? Or never sleeping, or just those extremes when coping skills become extreme. And we have a hard time really getting control of that regulation for ourselves.
Balance is important in all of it.
Yeah.
And there's always the aspect of, if you're ever concerned, or if someone is telling you that they're very concerned that your patterns or behaviors or that your coping mechanisms seem to be more harmful than helpful, always talking to your primary care doctor is important, just to make sure that you're safe and that there isn't some intervention that's needed, even for a short while. Or reaching out for some professional help from either a grief counselor or Gilda's Club, or somebody that can help give some insight into what might be going on and recommend what might be a good adjustment, just because this is a phase of life. But sometimes we need others with some expertise to come in and give us an idea of, okay, do I need something more professional for help? The majority of people do quite well, but also a lot of people need a little extra support, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is really okay to need and want support, or not even really want it, but get it anyway, right? That sometimes we need a little push, and but it is really important to allow yourself that that support and that help if you particularly need it, especially if you're having thoughts of hurting yourself, hurting someone else, despair, those kinds of things, that it's really important. Your life is really important. Your mental health is really important as your physical health, that you reach out and get that support. And yeah, and we will list on our on this post the suicide hotline for Kent County and the Network 180 number. Both places are 24-hour answering services for anyone who's having distress or worries or thinking about hurting themselves. They will answer and chat with you. We're very lucky here in West Michigan that we have a psychiatric urgent care center at Pine Rest that has walk-ins, and we've also listed that. I think that there's specific hours that they have. And again, you can call Emmanuel Hospice, and you could call Gilda's Club, and we'll help direct you to those places. Neither of us are emergency psychiatric care, but we certainly can help you get there. And give you some suggestions. So absolutely. Yeah, well, Ashley, any last thoughts about?
I just want to say, grief and loss is something that we've all experienced to some degree or fashion throughout our lives. And this is another time that we're feeling it pretty heavy, but as a community, we do a great job of supporting each other. I'm always happy to talk to anyone from the community that may need that extra support. Gilda's Club is a wonderful resource that is also there for the same purpose. And together we can get through COVID and get through this grief session, because there are strong people out there and they have the strengths and abilities, but we're happy to help show them that they're there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Our tagline is "In this together," and we want all of you to know that no one needs to do this alone. That we are truly all in this together. And I don't want to call it cool, but I might say that, is that the entire world is in this together. And so you are not alone. And we urge you to reach out and ask us questions, talk to us, get connected, and stay healthy. So thank you so much, Ashley, for being with us today and sharing your time and your wisdom. We really appreciate that. I love this discussion about what we can do and how our life, we just need to keep talking about this, how our life is changing. And that it's good to have these discussions. We're so lucky in West Michigan to have Emmanuel Hospice here to support people on that anticipatory grief process and past, and really feel very fortunate to have you here.
It's our honor. We love what we do. It's why we're here, and it's why we get up every day. And thank you for letting me come and share a little bit. It's been wonderful.
Thanks. So for all of you, Gilda's Club continues to have our virtual program. If you go to our website, gildasclubgr.org, you'll see our Gilda's Club virtual calendar, and you can email us or call us and get connected. We do have new member meetings right on Zoom. And so we'd love to get you connected if you're in a situation where you've been diagnosed with cancer, or someone in your life has, or someone in your life has died. So give us a call, connect with us. We'd love to support you. A couple of other things is that we have a great fundraiser coming up called West Side Walk, and that typically happens at the clubhouse. We're not exactly sure how it will look at the moment, but there's opportunity to get connected in that way, create a team, do some fundraising for us. It stays right here in West Michigan. There's more information again on our website. And again, I'm going to invite you just to communicate with us on this very post and let us know how you liked it. If there are other topics you'd like to hear about, other discussions, more information from Ashley or Gilda's Club, just let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, I think that's it. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Ashley, for being with us. And take care. Have a great day, everyone.